Hello and welcome to Arsenal Analysed. I'm JC. I hope you're doing well. In this video, I break down Aston Villa versus Arsenal, a very tough, close game which Arsenal edged 1-0. But I'll be breaking it all down. And if you do go on to enjoy today's video, a like would be super appreciated. And if you're new around here, why not consider subscribing? Now, what will we be breaking down in today's video? Some quick thoughts on the lineup and subs, followed by a breakdown of statistics and tactics. Then we'll be going into some in-depth analysis of the game itself and also some key players in my opinion. And then we'll finish up with a few shout outs for those of you who did comment on the preview video with your score predictions. But let's waste no more time at all and jump straight into things. So the lineup, a couple of surprises for the first time in a while, and they were forced changes, something that we didn't really know too much about even during Mikel Arteta's press conference. He really didn't give absolutely anything away whatsoever. And that was, firstly, Ramsdale. He had a hip injury. Apparently, this was something that he picked up during the Liverpool game, and maybe he should have come off a little sooner. Some have even speculated that it could have been the reason why we conceded the first goal. But Leno came in and done a really, really good job. There were question marks over whether or not he would be a little bit rusty as he hasn't featured in an Arsenal shirt for quite some time, but plenty of Premier League experience, and he did a really good job, especially with that save right at the very end of the game. We also saw the Smith back in the lineup as well, another forced change. This time, Martinelli down with illness, apparently. No sort of clues as to whether or not it might be COVID related, but with the international break just around the corner, he should probably be available for selection again when we play Crystal Palace next away from home. But the rest of this lineup really does pick itself when fit and available, as we do talk about quite often on this channel. No real surprises in there. And there was a few system changes, which we'll talk about in a later part of this video. Substitute-wise, Saka coming off on the 69th minute for Pepe was a good one. He got absolutely battered throughout this game. A really big challenge from Tyrone Mings around about sort of midway through the first half. But Nicola Pepe, who has had an impact off the bench at times since coming back from AFCON. So not a bad change to make there. Likewise with Lacazette coming off in the 78th. You know, at the end of the day, he's 0 for 30. Doesn't often last 90 minutes. And with 3 games in 6 days, it doesn't really surprise me. And then to really, really secure things towards the back end of the game, bringing Odegaard off, a very offensive player, doesn't really contribute too much to a defensive shape. He normally sits side by side with Lacazette in that 4-4-2 when we are defending. To bring Rob Holding on was a very good shout, and we did look to go 5 at the back at that point. So looking at some statistics and tactics throughout the game, nothing really kind of jumps out at me this time around when it comes to statistics. Very equal game on paper when you look at possession. Shots probably on the lower end of what we typically tend to expect. You know, we've just hit shy of 20 shots in total in the last 2 games. And in previous weeks, we've been hitting that in games on their own. Foul count pretty high for both sides, as well as yellow cards. It was quite a feisty game for those of you who did watch. But if we have a little look here at the passing shape for both teams, and what I'm about to highlight will be reiterated in some of the key moments that we'll break down in just a moment. We're looking here on the left-hand side for Arsenal at the moment for the passing shape. We can see Kieran Tierney here in a slightly more advanced role and Granit Xhaka in a slightly deeper role. Typically, we see those 2 3/8s, if you will, being Odegaard and Granit Xhaka, slightly higher. And we can see that with Odegaard on the right-hand side, but not so much with Granit Xhaka. And this was to counter the very narrow 5-man midfield that Aston Villa had. But if we look at Arsenal's heat map, there's a lot of deep red on the left-hand side for a change. In most weeks when we analyse these games, a lot of it is situated to that right-hand side. And that does coincide with a more attacking offensive role that Kieran Tierney was given in this game, with Granit Xhaka dropping slightly deeper into a double pivot with Thomas Partey. Now, if we have a look at Aston Villa's heat map, although they had near enough the same amount of possession, it doesn't look like they really tried to focus in one particular area and see an area in Arsenal's starting 11 as a particular weakness. One thing I will say is that there is a very narrow cluster of players in the central area of Aston Villa's midfield. And it was one of the reasons why Arsenal had so much success, I think, in that first half especially. But let's go and break down the very first goal, or the only goal of the game. So looking at picture number 1 here, I think the first thing that Steven Gerrard will be very unhappy with is the fact that there are only 2 Aston Villa players here marking what is 3 Arsenal players. Eventually, Odegaard does make a run into the box, but is not followed. Both Aston Villa players, as we can see here, go straight towards the ball, which is where Saka is, leaving Cedric with bundles of space on that right-hand side. And he is able to get a ball into the box, as we can see here in picture number 2. Now, it doesn't initially go to Saka. It is sort of headed around and bobbled around just a little bit before it eventually falls to Saka on the edge of the box, as we can see here in picture number 3. And I think it eventually comes off of his shin. It's not the cleanest of strikes, but it's got to go through so many bodies of players that Martinez doesn't get a clean look at the ball until quite late. And by that time, he can't really react to the ball, well, coming towards goal, and Arsenal go 1-0 up. Now, we're not going to go too deep with analysis today. This is going to be the second and only slide where we really kind of look to digest things. And we're going to go through the shape of both teams and where Arsenal typically tended to have more success compared to what Aston Villa had. But if we have a look here in picture number 1, there's that typical shape of Arsenal went in possession, the fullbacks slightly higher beyond the centre-backs, and we're looking at that diamond in midfield with both the wingers looking to provide width. Now, we do know that Smith Rowe likes to play more of a narrow winger role compared to Martinelli, who provides even more width compared to the Smith. But what we're looking at here in picture number 1 and number 3, they're the same picture. We're looking at the shapes of both sides, and we can see here that Aston Villa are playing very, very narrow. They were playing with Buendia and Coutinho, not natural wingers as such. They do like to play a little bit more narrow, more like number 10s, if you will. And that really did play into Arsenal's hands, because when Arsenal were playing with this narrow number 8 system, which is what we typically tend to play, we saw the opposite when we played against Liverpool. They were wide 8s. In this game, we went back to narrow 8s with Lacazette dropping deep, making those numbers up in midfield. Unfortunately, for the first time in a while, we weren't able to create overloads because Aston Villa were playing with effectively a narrow 5-man midfield. But what that did mean is that McGinn, for example, or even Douglas Luiz, they should have been, well, supporting Ashley Young, because it was an area that Arsenal were clearly looking to exploit because of his age, 36 years old, and Saka in some very, very fine form at the moment. We often saw Arsenal playing down the left-hand side with the narrow midfield of Aston Villa switching over to try and counter that. It did mean that Saka had bundles and bundles of space on that right-hand side, really looking to isolate Ashley Young and take advantage of an area and age, if we're being honest with you. And in this particular move, yes, Saka did manage to get down the right-hand side and deliver a ball into the box. It did fall to Martin Odegaard. It looked very, very similar to another goal that we scored earlier this season. Unfortunately, the ball didn't hit the back of the net. It eventually fell to Smith Rowe, hit the ball wide. But we can see here again in picture number 2, Arsenal going all the way down that left-hand side, playing really, really narrow. Aston Villa looking to counter that with their narrow 5-man midfield. And again, it allowed Arsenal to have all that space on the right-hand side. And the second picture is a play that happened after the first picture. And we can see here that Martin Odegaard has picked up on this opportunity to exploit space and age in Ashley Young down that right-hand side. Again, Arsenal did get in, and it was another opportunity that fell to Smith Rowe that went wide. So there were really big opportunities in that first half where Arsenal looked to exploit that right-hand side. And we saw that in the previous slide where Arsenal had a lot of deep red down that right-hand side. I've already explained picture number 3. We can see there in that blue line, the Aston Villa midfield, how narrow it was. Typically, Aston Villa like to play a system where their fullbacks provide a lot of width, but with Lucas Digne not available yesterday, Ashley Young dropped a little deeper, and Matty Cash was really isolated, mainly because Xhaka was dropping in a little deeper, as we can see here in picture number 3. We can see here that we've got Granit Xhaka with the 2 arrows. Sometimes he got forward, sometimes he got back. Jacob Ramsey should have been the player providing that support to Matty Cash. We've got Thomas Partey playing alongside him as a bit of a deep double pivot in there. And what that allowed Arsenal to do is get Kieran Tierney in down that left-hand side. That role that he's played so well for Arsenal in the past, playing to some of his strengths. And in my opinion, he had one of his better games against Aston Villa. But that didn't stop Arsenal from having that 5-man attacking front there, because Kieran Tierney was making up the 5th number on the left-hand side. Saka would often come inside to create problems, and Odegaard going wide We didn't see it as often. We didn't see those wide rotations with Saka on the right, Cedric on the right alongside Odegaard and Saka. It did happen, but not as often as we normally see. And on the left-hand side, Granit Xhaka did drop, as I mentioned, a lot deeper to allow Kieran Tierney to bomb on. And that way we saw Smith Rowe, as I already mentioned, he likes to play more on the inside as opposed to creating that width. And he did come inside, as we can see here, he's quite close to Lacazette. So that's going to about wrap up the tactical analysis part. But let's jump into some key players, in my opinion. And it was a tough one for me to break down. It was a tough one for me to pick who we should have gone with for this particular section, because Gabriel and Ben White were absolutely fantastic at the back. Odegaard, I think, had a 98% completion accuracy with his passing. So some fantastic individual performances. But I've gone with these three, starting with Thomas Partey. He's literally dropping 7 and 8 out of 10 every single game now, really kind of dictating the tempo deep and really the start of everything that Arsenal does good. A lot of those big switches that we saw to Saka in this game did come from Thomas Partey, but 88% completion accuracy, 1 key pass, completing 2 out of 3 dribbles, 2 tackles and 5 duels, 1 out of 9. Another top performance. And again, situated more towards the right-hand side in this particular game, as we can see here in his heat map. And the main factor in this is because we saw Xhaka take up a slightly deeper role to the one that we normally do. And that was to counter the 5-man midfield, as we've mentioned, with Aston Villa. We didn't want to be left short in midfield on those counter-attacks. What that did mean, though, is Kieran Tierney, who we're going to speak about next, was able to get down that left-hand side a lot more, very advanced. What we saw in, I think it was Arteta's second season, he was one of Arsenal's most attacking and most effective players, getting those balls into the box. And yesterday was exactly the same. We saw the best of Kieran Tierney once again. Passing accuracy, 79%. It would be harsh for me to say it should have been better, because he'd done a really good job. 87 touches, so really involved throughout the game. Only 2 long balls completed out of 7. Does that mean that we're looking for a more influential striker, shall we say? Will those numbers increase if we had a different figurehead up top? 6 clearances, which is great, and 2 out of 2 duels. But last and not least, star boy Saka, man of the moment, a boy in some fantastic form. He now has 10 goals in all competitions this season. I think he sits number 1 in the charts for most goal contributions in the Premier League for players aged under 21. I think it's either 13 or 14 goal contributions. And that's ahead of the likes of Phil Foden, who sits in a very good Manchester City team. We've also got Smith Rowe, Martinelli in there as well. But he got himself another goal, the goal winner in what was a tough game. We needed to bounce back in this game. Took the game by the scruff of the neck. Really had Ashley Young on toast. 73% passing accuracy, 2 key passes. So not only is he trying to, score goals himself, he's trying to provide for others. As we know, he's adding more assists to his game. Another stat here, 4 crosses, only 1 successful. Going back to what I said with Kieran Tierney, does that really highlight even further the need for a more instinctive, more physical striker or forward up top, and then winning 4 out of 9 duels, because there were a lot of the game yesterday where Arsenal did need to defend, and he done very well when doing so. I think it was very easy to see here who was man of the match, in my opinion. It was Saka. I think he was officially given it. I'm going to give it to him. Kieran Tierney, Thomas Partey and Odegaard made up the other 3 who were down as the vote on the Arsenal website. But let me know down in the comments below, was Saka your man of the match, or would you have given it to someone else? And then to finish up, we've got a few people here that did comment on the preview video with their score predictions. I don't think anyone got it right. I went for a 2-0. Judge went for a 2-0. History and Footy Lover went 2-0 as well. Scott went 2-1. And last but not least, Andy also went 2-1. So thank you very much for dropping your predictions on that video. And I think the next time we play is against Crystal Palace. So a few days before that game, I'll be dropping a preview video. And if you do want to get a shout out, all you need to do is pop your score predictions down in the comments. So that is going to about wrap things up for this video. I hope you have found it informative and enjoyable. And if you have done, please do pop a like. And also, if you're new around here, subscribing would be hugely appreciated. I think I'm just over 20 or 20 away from hitting that 1,200 magic number that I've put a target on. So please do subscribe if you're new around here. It really, really means the world to me. But that is going to about wrap things up for today. I'm JC. I'll catch you for the Palace game. But for now, stay safe and take care.